Welcome to Get Recc'd. I am one of your hosts, Stephen Falgu.
And I am also one of your hosts, Louis Falgu.
Here we are today. We promised it a while back. We're a little late on the delivery, but this is our bonus episode. We're going to be talking about Star Wars The Last Jedi. I want to be very clear. This is strictly for the SEO.
Yes. Yeah.
The SEO
yes.
is just so juicy right now.
The title for this video isn't even going to make sense. It's going to be like those weird YouTube Kids videos where it's just a string of Star Wars characters in no particular order.
Yeah.
Get that SEO.
Yeah, get those tags on there. Fidget spinner. Yeah. Got to get all the hot tags.
Yeah, the hot 2018 tags, fidget spinners.
Yeah. Everyone in 2018 still fidget spinning.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Well, my local grocery stores are running along as if that were the case.
Yeah, we're gonna look back one day on January 12th of 2018, and we're gonna say, "Man, what a time for fidget spinners that was."
Yeah. So this is a mini-sode. Maybe we'll do more of these in the future sometime if we have a topic to talk about, because I kind of said Steven's not coming on NormieCast again because we have this show. So if ever there's a reason to talk about something outside of the game, the sort of Rec Swap game, then I guess we'll do it in this format. Maybe there'll be new like logos and stuff for that. I don't know. But for the time being, obviously, the new Star Wars film, and not spin-off, like mainline Star Wars film, is a pretty big deal. So actually, I'll go ahead and open that up now, because...
Yeah, and I guess, with these mini-sodes, this still kind of fits in the whole vibe of this show, I think. And if we were to do other mini-sodes in the future, I still think they'd be some entertainment-adjacent sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how. So who knows? Maybe when this new Han Solo movie that everyone's been craving.
I hope not. I would hope not. But we'll have to work that out when we get to it. So this film has come out and everybody has universally loved it. And so I really don't feel like there's much reason for us to talk about it, because I mean, it's not like it's not like it's really all that interesting. It's like making a video where we discuss the, whether Citizen Kane is a good movie or not. Like, no shit, it's a good movie.
Yeah, it's like if we were to make a video about whether sliced bread is good. I mean,
exactly.
And I think one thing that we could say about this film is universally, top to bottom, everyone has said that it's better than the prequels.
Yeah.
So,
which I felt like was an obvious thing. So I'm glad to see that people agree. Yeah, obviously we're bullshitting with that. I mean, I feel like just as obvious as what this film is, I think another thing that's really obvious that we don't really need to discuss too much is that it's been very divisive. Like, that's kind of a no shit thing. Along with like things like the new Star Trek show, for example, it's got a huge divide between critics and audience on Rotten Tomatoes. Although on IMDb, I think the movie holds a high 7 right now. I think. Let me go check actually what it holds on IMDb. And that's a little
which
different.
Actually for IMDb is pretty good.
Yeah, although
IMDb is usually quite cynical.
Yeah, well, not sort of. Yeah, it's got a
7.5.
It's got a 7.5. Yeah, so that's pretty decent. Like, bad movies tend to be a little around the 6 range, because there's
just to show you the marketing machine. By the way, that page that you just pulled up, that IMDb page, was the page for The Force Awakens in all red and black, completely surrounded by, or not The Force Awakens, sorry, The Last Jedi, completely red and black, surrounded by a Last Jedi advertisement.
Oh yeah, well that's actually very common on IMDb. Whenever there's a big movie, they do that whole like as if the IMDb needs to advertise a film to you that you're already checking its page anyway.
Right, as if I checked the Star Wars The Last Jedi and I was like, I really don't know if I'm gonna watch this film. Yeah. And then I see the ad, I was like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So a 7.5 is all right. but great movies tend to hold around eights. And I'm talking, I don't necessarily mean like by my standard. I just mean like in terms of agreement. Like when a great movie comes out and most people agree that it's great, it tends to be around an 8 on IMDb. And when a movie comes out and most people tend to agree it's bad, it tends to be around a 6. And that's just from what I've noticed because of the way that people rate things on websites like this. Although either give it like a 10 or a 1. Like if you ever check the score breakdowns, there's tons of 10s and tons of 1s to a really disproportionate degree. And that's kind of why that happens. But
yeah, and then you have films like the award-winning Suicide Squad, where everyone was just wrong and the critics were paid off.
Right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that. Well, unlike Suicide Squad, I feel like The Last Jedi is just terrible. Like Suicide Squad, that movie, the critics. It's funny how the critics work. When like a really truly great product comes out, like Suicide Squad, all the critics hate it. But when something really terrible comes out, like The Last Jedi, all the critics love it. It's just kind of a weird state of affairs.
Yeah, one thing about The Last Jedi. So I feel like I saw something the other day that is very true in that the people who hate Star Wars films the most are Star Wars fans.
Yes.
And I think that The Last Jedi definitely shows cases that.
Yes.
I'm sure, we were joking around about it, but I'm sure anyone who's coming to this video has probably seen the mixed reactions on both sides. Mm-hmm. and I'm sure we'll get there, but on the one side, a lot of the reaction is more towards how this film affected the lore and the characters, and that's why I feel like Star Wars fans are particularly angry.
Well, that and also a series of a series of sort of plot contrivances and grievances, I guess. I meant to say grievances like people are with the plot. But yeah, the grievances are about plot contrivances and plot holes and things like that. And it's the kind of, right off the bat, before we even get into our opinions in this film or anything like that, I just want to say it's interesting because I'm simply talking about the argument here that, the film is worse than the prequels or is a worse Star Wars film than the prequels or something like that, is like what kind of almost proves that it isn't. And I know it's all subjective, but what kind of almost proves that it isn't is that the only complaints you really do hear about this film are on that plot level. There aren't really any technical complaints or anything like that. Unlike with any one of the prequels, where there's endless things to complain about. It's not just that the plot is poorly constructed or whatever, or bloated or anything like that, or that the characters act weirdly. It's that the entire film is just completely inept. So,
right, or that your film is full of characters that are complete racial stereotypes. That was a fun part of the prequels.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and that's the thing. Like, because we'll get into it, but I sympathize with a lot of the complaints that people have with this film. But what I'll continue to not understand at all, even with a film like Rogue One, which I just didn't care for very much, is anybody who would claim that these films, this new string of Star Wars films, is worse than the prequels in really any way, except maybe the creativity angle. But like, creativity isn't inherently a good thing. And
right. I mean,
the prequels are a good example of why that is.
Yeah, I mean, the prequels definitely did a lot of world building, good, bad, or indifferent, mostly bad, but
yes,
that is one thing that and just in general, I mean, Lucas did a lot of world building. That's really the only place where I could see that you could make maybe an argument.
Yeah. Which is one place that I have seen. It's like, well, people say like, oh, well, the prequels are bad too, but at least they were creative or original or had, added things to the Star Wars universe, which only a true fanboy would make a case that a film is better because it adds lore to a universe. Like, that's...
Yeah, it was really gripping when Anakin talked about how he felt about sand.
It's just funny. It's just funny too, because a lot of that lore Star Wars fans hate, like midi-chlorians and stuff like that. And I
Right, and I'm sure we'll get there, but this film retconned or tried its best to retcon a lot of that too, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, so let's actually talk about the film, and I'll let you begin because you're our resident Star Wars fanboy here on Get Recc'd. So actually, why don't you give a little bit of background relating to these new Star Wars films, just in the way you view them, because everybody knows what they are, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, well, actually, my show on the Food Network, it's a Star Wars cooking
Empire
show.
Chef, Empire Chef. I remember the name.
Yeah, yeah, Empire Chef. That's correct. Yeah, we typically whip, and stir on my show.
Right.
Yeah. So what I'll say about these films is, I think looking holistically, taking a step back and not even talking about this film specifically right now, but holistically thinking about this trilogy, the weight that was placed on the directors. At one point it was going to be three different directors, but now down back to two. The weight that was put on these directors just because of Star Wars as a property and a license and all the baggage that comes with Star Wars, good and bad, all of the lore and world building that was done, not even within the films, but in the extended universe stuff that was then chopped and put into kind of a side thing. And now you have this story team that's like this basically council of writers who are making sure all the Star Wars stuff stays in line with lore. I think that, and, I give probably not Rian Johnson as much credit for this, but like J.J. Abrams, I give him a ton of credit for doing what he was able to do with The Force Awakens, because this was something that was huge. I mean, people didn't have a Star Wars movie at that time for probably, it would have been what, like 10 years, I think, something like that.
Yeah, I think exactly 10, because didn't Revenge of the... Oh wait, there was also the Clone Wars movie. We're forgetting about that.
Oh yeah, well, we don't talk about that one. No, but I will plug, if anyone hasn't seen the Clone Wars show, it starts very slow, but it is very good. And anything that Filoni does, both the Clone Wars show and Star Wars Rebels, are both very good. You can find them on Netflix and I think Amazon. But with that being said, the movie was trash.
Right.
So J.J. Abrams had to come in and basically recreate Star Wars from almost the ground up. Lucas had some sort of a vision for what this, for those who might not be aware, there was almost always planned to be 9 films as a part of Lucas's original vision, and he had somewhat of a story idea going into this that they kind of threw off to the side, honestly.
Yeah, I've heard.
But what JJ did was very smart, and I think what Star Wars the property did was very smart. I mean, Force Awakens, it's been talked about before. It is very derivative of A New Hope. I mean, it's especially the final trench run and all of that. Not that I think that it's completely the same, but it was very clearly, at the time, J.J. Abrams had to, one, convince Star Wars fans that Star Wars could be Star Wars again, and two, bring in an entirely new generation of Star Wars fans. And what he was able to do with The Force Awakens, I think, was brilliant. I think that time has not been kind to The Force Awakens. I think that people have been slowly more negative on Force Awakens because of what it is. But at the time, when it came out, I mean, it had to be what it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now we're here. Now we're at The Last Jedi. J.J. Abrams kind of hands the torch off to Rian Johnson, and this is the first one where they can really, and not that they couldn't have done something completely new with Force Awakens, but this is the first one where it's like, okay, now it's time to take Star Wars, this trilogy, and this Skywalker saga into a new direction. I think what's most interesting about this film is if you go back before this film came out, everyone was nitpicking every aspect of the trailer, saying this is exactly Empire Strikes Back again. What are they doing? They're making it the same. And now we're here. The movie came out, and it is very different. And people are like, "Why is it so different?"
Yeah. Well, that's a phenomenon that's been observed in many different fandoms. This is just how they behave, you know. I feel like I don't feel like that's unique to Star Wars fans. That's always a thing that happens. You know, we want the same but different.
But different, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, and I want to just to play devil's advocate here, or play good cop, I guess, for the Star Wars fans. You know, I don't. I think it's more than that. Like I think that. I don't think that when people wanted Force Awakens to be different, it inherently means that they believe that anything that's different is going to be good or is going to satisfy them.
Oh, right, exactly.
But I definitely think that the things that the film did, I will defend people who are angry with this film and say that they do have a genuine place of grievance. They're not just upset because or at least most of them aren't just upset because, you know, oh, it's too different. I wanted this to be completely streamlined experience like Empire Strikes Back again, except not quite. And they do have specific grievances with the movie. Although I will say a lot of the grievances that you see do boil down to, I had an idea of where this was going to go. It didn't go there, and that upsets me. You do see that a lot.
This is to say, because I think we're skirting on it, and we'll definitely get there. This is all to say, this is absolutely going to be very spoiler heavy, by the way.
Oh yeah, I was meaning to, thank you for pointing that out. I was meaning to.
Yeah, so if for whatever reason you have not seen The Last Jedi, just don't listen to this yet.
Yeah,
I don't know how you probably wouldn't have at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe if you were on IMDb and you didn't see the ad, maybe then.
That's right. The 7.5 is like, well, that's pretty good, but you know, you just the ad missed you. If only you had seen that in combination with the 7.5, I think you would have been in that in the theater seat like 10 minutes away.
Right.
But,
right.
Yeah.
So continuing on that frame of thought, so you have Force Awakens, which is, okay, this is Star Wars again, everyone. Look how shiny it is.
Right.
This one is, okay, we're going to start taking Star Wars into a new direction. And the last one, now 9, for reasons that we'll get into, really has to be something like completely new. That J.J. Abrams now has like a whole open, just the entire wheelhouse available to him for where he can take it. I think what's most interesting about this one, thinking holistically, going back to what I mentioned about how these directors have all this baggage that they are carrying with them because of the Star Wars property. This movie, on multiple occasions, either overtly or discreetly, are saying, hey, forget all of that. We need to move past that, because that is weighing everything down. So this is going to be something new. And that's reflected both in some of the dialogue as well as reflected in the actions of some of the characters. Because in Force Awakens and now in this one, for instance, as an example, Rey and Finn are often quoted as thinking the characters from the original trilogy are these legends and these icons that are bigger than themselves, and they don't even believe that they're real. Almost, it's Han Solo in The Force Awakens that tells them that all of it's true. And on this movie, now they're getting past that. Their legends that they've built up in their minds are not the superheroes that they thought they were. And I think that's almost immediately exemplified by her pointing the lightsaber at Luke with the intention that Luke will join them and they'll fight to win against the First Order. Luke takes the lightsaber and immediately throws it away.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens on multiple occasions throughout the film. This central theme of taking those preconceived notions and not necessarily disposing of them, but moving past them.
Well, yeah, I would say one thing about The Last Jedi that's got a lot of people pissed off as well, and is that Ryan Johnson, who wrote this film, did he write it alone, or were there?
I mean, everything goes through the story
Right.
council these days.
Well, yeah. Well, obviously, but I mean, like, is he like credited as like being a head writer or something? Right? It's just him. Like, he's not credited with somebody else, is he?
I believe so.
Okay. Well, so we'll put all the blame on Ryan Johnson. Then I don't know if that's exactly correct, but that's what we'll do. Ryan Johnson, I think in this script, what a lot of fans, what I've seen from their reviews, they're very, 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 very angry reviews, is that Ryan Johnson just said "fuck you" to the fans. You know, he came in and he insulted the fans, he insulted the franchise, but you know what it seems.
And also that he said "fuck you" to JJ.
Yes.
He took what JJ was supposed, JJ's grandmaster vision, and said, "Fuck that."
Well, you know what? That part may be true because the information we know the information now that these films are just being written, like these films are being written one after another. They did not have a plan, so I think it's fairly clear.
I don't know if that's completely accurate because I've heard that too, but I've also heard on multiple occasions that JJ, Ryan, and Colin Trevorrow were all writing these films simultaneously.
Yeah, but I believe it was Ryan who specifically said that they were writing them in succession, and that he wrote, like, I think it was Ryan Johnson where we got this information from. But whatever the case, I think it's fairly clear to me, at least, the impression that I get, that Ryan Johnson, he did absolutely take what a lot of what The Force Awakens built and intentionally said, that's not like what was being built up here is a red herring. He made a lot of it a red herring. And I really, really struggle to believe that it was initially intended to be a red herring, especially given how safe that film was. And so in a roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is I think that what fans are calling like an insult to the franchise, I don't think that's the right way to interpret it, or at least I really don't think that that's what Ryan Johnson intended for this to be. I think he just, in an effort to do something new, he just wanted to make sure that absolutely nobody was going to have been able to have predicted what was going to happen in this film. Like all of the fan theories based around Snoke and all these characters, Ryan Johnson came in and wanted to make sure that none of these would be true, so that the film would truly be something different. Because imagine if the film came out and, like, you know, because they were like groups of fans who had decided about what was going to happen with certain characters. Imagine if this film came out and then one of them got proven right, all the other ones got proven wrong. And now a lot of people aren't even surprised by what happened because they'd already predicted it was going to happen, you know? And then the film would have felt predictable. And I think very much he wanted to make sure that would not happen. And it didn't. I guess in return, a lot of these people felt like he was intentionally shitting on them and telling them, fuck you. But I really don't think that's at all what happened here. And, I also don't think that it throws away so much of what The Force Awakens built to the point that The Force Awakens ended up being pointless. I think that by the time this trilogy is complete, or at least these two films as they are right now, if you watch them in order, it will just feel as if those things were intentional red herrings to make the story more interesting. Because I certainly felt like the things that Johnson did in this film were interesting and did actually leave me riveted through a lot of this movie, and that it didn't do the things that honestly I didn't even want it to do anyway. Like, for example, just to put an example out there, I really did not want Rey's parents to be somebody we already knew, and to continue this kind of lineage angle of these films where you have to be related to somebody. I didn't want them to do that, and they didn't do that. Like, I mean, they did something even more extreme than what I had thought they would have done, in that they basically said she came from nobodies. But to me, that's interesting.
So let's talk about probably what people would consider the two biggest, what ended up being red herrings. That would be what you just mentioned, race lineage, and then the other one being, I guess, Snoke.
Yeah.
So to me, I feel like the only one that's really applicable would be Rey's parents, because really nothing in The Force Awakens necessarily predicated that we would learn any information on Snoke, right? People just assume he's just this big overarching villain, and I think, from what I've seen, people would have assumed we would have learned more about him.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily true, but I do think people definitely would have assumed that he would have played much more prominent role than he ended up playing.
Well, there was this assumption in a lot of people that I'd seen that, yeah, like they made these theories that Snoke was like some character from the prequels who was going to return, or anything.
Darth Plagueis.
Yeah, exactly, or anything of that sort. And
Jar
it's
Jar
like
Binks.
Jar Jar Binks, the famous one. But it again, like you said in Force Awakens, it really didn't imply that at all. In fact, I remember that people were complaining that Snoke was just bullshit and that he sucked in The Force Awakens, and I actually happen to agree with that. He was one of the weakest elements of that film. He was a complete waste. So, again, I was very happy when they just said fuck it and killed him off. But yeah, I agree. I don't think it's applicable to call him a red herring.
In general, with that character, I feel like he was just a weak link to this trilogy.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like if he would have remained alive, this trilogy would have suffered for it.
Absolutely.
So then, to me, the biggest red herring would be Rey's lineage, because they talk about it quite a bit in Force Awakens. You always are getting kind of hints that there's something more, or somebody has more information than we do about it. Like, for instance, there's a scene where Maz Kanata like asks Han, who is she? She has some connection to Luke in some way, because she grabs his lightsaber and starts to get these visions. We get the flashback where she's with Inkar Plot, and she's like a little girl, and there's a spaceship that's flying away.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that feels like the biggest one. And you mentioned it. I think where it ended up is exactly where I think it needed to end up, because so I always felt like J.J. Abrams called the first film The Force Awakens. To me, for that to have happened, the Force needed to be awoken, right? So if she was just related to somebody who was already a Force user, that isn't interesting. It's much more interesting, and a central theme of this film specifically as well, and this plays into it, it's much more interesting that she rises above her rank and becomes greater than the sum of her parts. Now, I think in Force Awakens, she's like always kind of much better than maybe she should be at certain things. But I think that makes this thread even more powerful. It's like, why is she better than she is? She has no reason to be that way, because she's not related to anyone that makes her that way. And this is actually where I think they start to kind of retcon the midichlorians thing, because now she's just, or I guess you could make the argument that maybe her midichlorian count is high.
Oh yeah, she has a very, very, very high midichlorian count. They're going to sit her down at a council of people who are sitting around in a circle doing nothing and talking to each other, and they're going to discuss how high her midichlorian levels are.
Now, I don't know.
This is what I want in the third film.
I don't know if you saw this, but this made me very sad. Rian Johnson had an interview recently, and he said that now Rey's lineage, that ball, is in J.J. Abrams' court. I so hope that they do not try some way to retcon this. I've heard people make the argument that, maybe Snoke just implanted in both of their minds that her lineage is nothing, but she actually is connected to somebody. I've also heard that, maybe her parents are nobody, but what about her grandparents? What about 2 generations back? Are they somebody? Maybe she's in some way connected to Obi-Wan, because that would have been forever ago. It wouldn't necessarily have been her direct parents. I hope they don't do that. That would just completely undermine the themes of this film and the themes of this entire overarching trilogy so far. And I think it would just, I don't see any good way that you do it without it just being like, oh, by the way, she's actually connected to Obi-Wan. And then everyone goes, great.
Yeah, it's too late. I think that's the thing. And even if there are people out there who genuinely believe it would have been better if she had been connected to somebody, like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but because Rian Johnson did that in this film, you can't do it now. it will be so ham-fisted if you do that now. Like, I for one, am actually very concerned about the next film, but we can get into that at the end.
Yeah, maybe we can get into that a little later.
We've kind of been jumping really far ahead, and that's kind of my fault. So let's just to sort of give a slight bit of background, because I think we'll get into our real thoughts on how good we think this film is soon. So, Steven, and then I'll go. How did you feel about The Force Awakens? And the reason I'm asking you that is, when we get into our opinions on this film, I think it's going to be better to know, how do we feel about this trilogy so far? Like, even in hindsight, just in hindsight, how is The Force Awakens as a film for you?
I still really enjoy The Force Awakens. So actually, before watching this film, I kind of marathoned all the Star Wars films leading up to this. I felt like now, given a couple years, or for some reason, I wasn't as positive on it as I had been when I had originally seen it. But I mean, coming out of The Force Awakens, I really enjoyed it. I think that it's top 4 Star Wars films for me, somewhere in there, top 4, top 5.
Yeah, and then I'll say I'm still, despite what people would probably expect from me, I'm still one of that film's most ardent defenders. Like, I would say that, I mean, when you were really positive about it back when it came out, I was too. We'd seen it together. I remember I don't think we saw it for the first time together, but I saw it for the first time with you. And you'd seen it like before then already. But I was extremely positive, and much like you, I'd say that seeing it now, it doesn't exactly make me as excited, but I would say the film is just as strong, or at least almost as strong as I remembered it being. And
yeah, to me, and I mean, we've touched on it. It is very similar to New Hope, but to me, Force Awakens evokes the same feelings that I get when I watch New Hope, which is just kind of like this childlike wonder, this just really fun film. I think for me, what brought down The Force Awakens, having seen it now, is, so not only is it like just thematically very similar to New Hope, they do a lot of things where they are just forcing references down your throat, to the point where there's a scene where like Finn puts his arm on that battle chest table, and it turns on, and the shot just sits on that for too long.
Yeah.
And stuff like that really wears it down for me a little bit.
But you know what I will say is that I feel like that film is an extremely strong film for what it is trying to be. This is a problem. This is kind of a problem I have with The Last Jedi. And I didn't have with Force Awakens, is that the film's very concise. It really does not overstay its welcome in any way. There's only like one scene that I feel didn't need to be there, and that was like, what is it called? The Rothgar? Whatever the fuck the thing was that was like a CGI tentacle. That was kind of dumb and kind of unnecessary. But beyond that, the look of the film was just incredible. It was something you hadn't seen in a film like that. Shit. Let me turn that phone on. But it was something that you didn't get from films around that time. You still kind of don't, but I feel like it'll have a good influence. The amount of practical effects, just the look and feel of that film was quintessentially Star Wars. And
yeah, there's some stuff in there, like I think of 3 really impactful scenes to me. One, when Kylo freezes Poe's blaster shot in midair, and freezes him as well, and then they walk by it and it's still frozen in midair.
Yes, that entire opening scene is just incredible. Like, it's a phenomenal way to bring you back into Star Wars.
The fighter stuff on Takodana at Maz's castle, when you have the X-wings that are coming through the water.
Oh yeah,
and leading up, and then the final one is that, those battles between Rey, Kylo, and Finn, and especially specifically that scene where he tells her to, like, he can train her in the Force or whatever, and she has his lightsaber and her lightsaber clashing, and the light is reflecting on her face, and she kind of closes her eyes and like recenters herself.
Yes.
Some stuff like that is just really great in that film.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. But so beyond so on every technical level, I think that film is incredible. on a plot level, obviously, it is essentially a retread. I think it's a very great retread. It's a good way to put it, but it is definitely a retread. And yeah, I do have some problems with Rey. Not as much as other people do, but she certainly has very little character beyond just being extremely entertaining. That's probably why I don't mind her in that film, because she doesn't have a ton of character, and she has some Mary Sue attributes for like the first half of the film. That fight scene between her and Kylo Ren makes complete sense. People overstated the shit out of that. The dude was injured and like multiple times, like it was ridiculous. But there were some things in the Millennium Falcon particularly that just didn't add up. But that being said, I loved everybody's performances. I thought that the sort of jokey dialogue, people equated it to Marvel in like that sort of forgettable kind of way, but I didn't feel that. For me, it really works. It's just a bunch of entertaining characters who have great chemistry, and that film's wonderful, in my opinion. So that's where we are on that. I mean, I didn't care for Rogue One very much. I don't know about you, but moving into this film, I don't think, I'll say right off the bat, I don't think it's a better film. I think it's a weaker film actually than The Force Awakens, and I think the film overall is bloated. I think it's slightly messy, but I also feel like the highs of this film, like the moments that really stuck with me, I just think are so much better than anything that happened in Force Awakens. And there's a lot of stuff in here that was just absolutely riveting and really quite stellar, that I'm very positive overall on it.
Yeah, and I think it goes without saying, I feel the same. I think that I'm probably more positive on this one than you are. Like this one to me, and I've seen it so many times at this point, this one to me is probably within the top 3 Star Wars films.
Right.
And so Force Awakens was, I said, maybe top 4, so I don't know if that makes it that much better, but I think that, I mean, coming out of probably the first 2 screenings, I would have called this my favorite Star Wars film. I probably would have called this one of my favorite films. Now, I think having seen it more times and really digesting it, I think it's fallen down from that list probably a little more, but it's still way up there for me. I think that some of the stuff, I think that for me, probably what it is those highs that you talked about are just so spectacular.
Yeah.
In fact, that, like, I don't know what you would call it, maybe like the back 2/3 of the movie or so, once you get to that Red Room scene,
oh my God,
and the hyperdrive stuff,
yeah,
and then even that stuff on Crate, all of that is just so amazingly done, and the cinematography in those scenes, and just how captivating all of that stuff is, especially going in that first watch. Seeing that stuff for the first time was just crazy.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is why this film still, I feel like I look past a lot of the plot holes, a lot of the stuff that I feel like probably is a little weaker about this film. So maybe what I'll do is I'll start there. So where do I think the problems are with this one? Well, for one, I think that first portion of this movie, some of those cuts are incredibly quick and incredibly jarring. In fact, the one, I don't remember what it cuts from, but I remember it cuts from some place where it's quite dark, and then it cuts to a shot of Leia with her hand over her face, and they're in hyperdrive, and it is so startling that, like, your eyes can't even adjust to how, like, much that contrast is. Mm-hmm. And so that happens a lot in the beginning. It's like Rey comes into Luke and he sees her and Chewie and he goes, "Where's Han?" And then boom, it quick cuts to Kylo. And I like that stuff, but I think it's so quick that it's hard to digest.
Yeah.
The other big one for me is Leia flying through space. That just looks so silly.
I know.
Every time I saw it, I just could not get over how silly it looks. I understand what they were going for, and I understand. I mean, honestly, to me, the only thing, like, if John Williams' score was not on there, I think the whole audience would have just cracked up every time because it just looks ridiculous.
Yeah.
Just incredibly ridiculous. To me, that's like it. Those are my two big ones. I think that there are things that people have argued that I've seen related to, like, well, how do bombs fall in space and all of this stuff? And I'm just like, look, I looked past it. I never thought about it. And I think that's the biggest thing is, like, as long as I'm not thinking about it, I really don't care. Like, I'm not nitpicking to that level. If we want to nitpick Star Wars to that level, I mean, we can tear apart almost all of them. I mean,
well, yeah. So, let me say, so I'll add to what you said, because everything that you said, I also, the cut thing I never noticed, but I only saw.
The other one real quick is, a lot of people have a problem with the casino stuff. And the only part of that I agree is that I do think that chase scene probably overstays its welcome a little bit. I think we'll get into that because that's probably the biggest point of contention, that whole casino scene in general. The only portion of that I agree with on people is that chase scene I do feel like is a little too long for what it is.
That's what I'm actually that's what I was actually just about to add, was that casino scene. So the whole, first of all, that entire scene felt like it came straight out of the prequels. You know what it reminded me of a little bit? When I initially saw it, and then somebody brought this up later. I don't remember who I watched who brought this up. But it's true that this is probably why it was giving me prequels flashbacks, is because it is sort of like the 50s diner from Attack of the Clones, where it's just like, it's so oddly specific to real life. And I know why that is too. So the weird thing about this scene is, for me, the whole Finn and Rose thing was entertaining, but it was kind of fluff for the most part. Like, the one scene with them that really I thought was really great was when they actually ended up getting captured, and everything from there on in that scene, like the Phasma battle. I loved all that. But the whole casino thing was weird. So it had this sort of overtone of, like, it was almost inserting a sort of message about, in parallel to our world, of how war is a business, and it's saying in this universe war is also a business. And I actually think that's an interesting theme. It's an interesting parallel to draw from real life, and it does it in a way that doesn't just feel like it's no longer escapism, and it's just reminding me of how shitty real life is. Like, it was making a point, and it could have actually added some interesting dynamics. In fact, it sort of did with whatever the fucking swindler guy, what's the actor, Guillermo del Toro, right?
No, Benicio del Toro.
Benicio del Toro. Sorry, it's Guillermo del Toro is the director.
Guillermo's the director.
yeah, right. Okay. That character. So that stuff was interesting, but it was done in such a way that was just preachy. Because she sits there and she spells, like Rose, stands there and spells this shit out to you at the beginning of the scene. Just goes, like, it basically just says to you, hey, you know how in real, like, this is like in real life how war is a business and animals get hurt. Oh yeah, the whole animal rights thing was just really weird. It was done in such a way that was not subtle. And the whole scene, that entire sequence, was not subtle. And I didn't find it to be particularly fun. The whole casino setting was just kind of bland. Sure, they had some cool costumes and physical, practical monster effects, or alien effects, I guess, which I enjoy in these films. But besides that, I wouldn't say it was terrible. I mean, it got pretty campy when they started writing on the animals and they let them free. And what does Rose say? She's like, they let them free, and then they're like, now it's whatever the fuck she says. When they let all the animals free.
Yeah.
It's just
now it was worth it.
Yeah, that's it, right? Yeah. And it's just ridiculous. And so the rest of the Finn and Rose scenes with them kind of being the B plot in this film was fine. I was okay with it. I thought they had some chemistry, and I like Finn. But yeah, I got to side with people on that. That entire sequence just dragged the movie down every time I saw it. I didn't care for it.
I think that what's interesting about that scene, and I don't think that it happens on the casino. So whether they needed to like overtly state it while they were there or not, um, is a valid point. I think what's interesting about that scene going then into the ship when Benicio del Toro's character is looking at who the owner of the ship was. They find out, oh, it's a weapons manufacturer for the First Order. And then it's like, oh, wait, actually, he sold weapons to both sides. I think that one thing about this trilogy that I have really enjoyed seeing so far is that Star Wars has always been so night and day, good and evil, right? In fact, you even have a light and a dark side.
Yes.
I like that this trilogy is starting to show more of the gray areas. And I think that's why I really like the Clone Wars show and the Star Wars Rebels show is they do a lot of that as well, where it's like, I'll specifically call out one of the Star Wars Clone Wars plot lines where they actually go to some separatist planets, because this is during like when they have the Trade Federation and everything. They go to some separatist planets, and these are just normal people. They just happen to be on the side of the bad guys. And it's that gray area stuff that I think Star Wars really needs. And I think that it's interesting that they're now starting to bring that into the films. Well, this is a lot of that gray area stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to say, when you mentioned the ship part, that's exactly what I mean when I say I like the idea of showing the business angle of war, and, you know, how it isn't as clear cut as the films have liked to make up to this point. And I think that scene on the ship where he, you know, says like this person sold weapons to both sides. That's exactly what I'm referring to. Like that was what I would have wanted to see. Like that was a great subtle way to have that in the film and to sort of expand on that theme. What is not a subtle way is to have Rose sit there and spell it out to you, like a scene.
And she wants to punch her fist through this whole dirty town.
Yeah, exactly. That's just that's what I'm talking about. It's like, so I like that angle of the film. So I brought it in as a negative thing, but I do like that angle of the film a lot, actually. It's just that this scene is where it got preachy. That was kind of what I was saying. But yeah, no, I agree, actually. That scene on the ship was really cool. That was a very good way to do it. And that was really smart and pretty subtle.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about that scene, actually, is if you think about it, like, from the standpoint of the characters, Finn never really chooses a side to that point. I mean, he chooses a side, and that side is Rey.
Right.
He isn't good, he isn't bad, and Benicio del Toro points this out to him and says, hey, don't choose a side, buddy. Like, nobody's really good. And that continues to, like, drip through to when they get on the Snoke ship and Benicio del Toro sells them out, and he says, hey, you're going to blow them up, they're going to blow you up. It's all the same. And in that moment, Finn actually makes a choice, which I think is like a very interesting dichotomy, because it kind of muddles that theme to me a little bit. But
well,
anyway,
speaking of Finn, here's another issue I have that sadly, with the way the film ends and what the kind of events that unfurl, it just wouldn't have worked. But something I still would have wanted to happen regardless is when I think Finn should have sacrificed himself. I think he should have died.
Yeah, so that is another thing that I was actually just about to mention. So this film, we talked about it, does a lot of head fakes.
Yeah,
a lot of head fakes.
Yeah, almost to the point where it becomes you begin to expect it to fake you out.
Right, and that's probably the one where you expect, where it starts to be like, okay, guys, because even in the way that it didn't happen, because it really did look like he would.
Yeah.
Like Rose crashes into him to save him. If Rose crashed into him, they'd both be dead. Like,
yeah.
Like no question. Yeah. So it's like they really, like, why even do that in general?
And
at that point.
Also, am I supposed to look at her as the good person when she literally she was like, okay, so this guy who I love is doing something really noble and he's gonna save this entire group of rebels. Fuck that. I'm gonna crash into him, keep them out of the way at the expense of everybody else possibly dying because of my action. And it's like, if you didn't already like Rose, you probably hated her at that point. And then she says that bullshit line about how we have to save what we love or whatever, and it's just stupid.
Yeah, we can't fight against what we hate. We need to
Yeah.
fight for what
It's
we
like,
love.
what the fuck does that even mean? Like, yes, you need to fight against the fucking First Order. They're about to kill you. Like what are you gonna do? But and it's a thing where it was sort of like that's what the whole Finn and Rose things build up to, which is probably why after seeing the film I was more negative on it than I was when I was watching it. Because for it to build up to Rose making a dumb decision that kind of stopped something from happening that really should have happened and something that would have been interesting and really emotionally affecting, it's just garbage to me. So but here's what I was saying is like I don't think they could have done it because let's say you have Finn die. In order for the events to happen after that, you would have needed him to have failed in doing that, and so that everything else could have continued to occur, and that would have been too far on the angle of everybody keeps failing. If he dies, a character we care about sacrifices himself, and it's just worth nothing and adds nothing. And if they had killed him and kept everything afterwards the same, that would have had to have happened. So what I say is then don't fake us out at all. Don't have him go out in front of the barrier. Don't have that happen at all. It was completely unnecessary. If you can't do it, don't do it. Because I wouldn't have wanted Finn to have died in this movie if they hadn't shown me that sequence. You know what I mean? So
yeah, because to me, you're confounding a lot of like character arc conclusions in that scene, right? So this film is clearly building Poe into a character who's becoming more of a leader. He makes brash decisions, he fails horrendously multiple times throughout the course of this film, and finally, in the moment where everyone's lives are on the line and he realizes it's a suicide mission, finally he pulls the squad back, right? So you have that going on. Then you also have Finn, like I mentioned, who has been this kind of flip-floppy, just trying to get the hell out of here, like wants to be with Rey or something, and doesn't really pick a side, doesn't really stand for anything, finally takes a stand. But you know that that's not going to pay out, so why even have done it? Like, that's trying to do it that way in that scene, having both of those characters reach that conclusion, really just muddies the whole thing. You easily could have had, I mean, honestly, Finn picks a side when he slaps Phasma in the face and says, "I'm rebel scum," or whatever.
Yeah.
End it there. He doesn't need to make any more heroic actions, right? I mean, we know now Finn is a hero. He's on this side. He's fighting for this side. Just let Poe make the decision to pull everyone out so they can get the hell out of there. But instead, they tried to continue to push Finn's arc to a point where it was like, well, this is just silly at this point.
Yeah.
There's too much going on here. Because also, even the other thing is, if he would have actually killed himself, I think I would have been disappointed in that. Because then it's like, oh, well, great. Like the First Order, they blew up the big thing again. There was a big thing that they needed to blow up, and they blew up the big thing again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
but that whole thing just, I don't, honestly, you should have just cut it and not mentioned it. Like, I know they filmed it, but cut it. It wouldn't have really changed anything. That whole sequence, just, God, what a waste. But one last thing I'll say as a negative, and it's not the only other thing that I'm negative on in this film, but it's just another thing that I just thought of, and, I want to wrap it up. People mentioned one plot hole that, I think, maybe not a plot hole, but just a weird character decision that Laura Dern's character not telling Poe her plan and leaving him in the dust, which ends up being a bad decision in every single way. And it's not portrayed as if it's a bad decision. Like, she's very much portrayed as a very thinking, a very intelligent leader. And it's never portrayed that she isn't that. It's portrayed very much that she is like the foil to Poe, because Poe's really brash and she's not brash, so therefore she's in the right. But then she makes that mistake, which is a just ridiculous mistake that is clearly only there so that we can have that hyperspace scene, which, if that's why they did it, then okay, it was worth it, because that hyperdrive sequence was fucking incredible.
So amazing.
But that being said, they shouldn't have put themselves in a place where they needed to do that to get to the hyperdrive scene. She should have just explained her plan to him. Like, there's no reason plot-wise why she should not have done that. And once again,
although, so playing devil's advocate to that point, so my explanation for that is There is also no reason why she should have told him, because this is someone who just crashed the majority of the crew and destroyed a majority of the fleet. In fact, got them in this whole situation to begin with because he was so dumb about it.
Right.
There was also no guarantee that telling him would have changed the course of events, if you think about it. Because although at the time when he's on the ship going to the planet, he's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. While he's on that bridge, he could just have easily been like, this plan is going to fail and then also have mutinied. So I think from the standpoint of her character and from the events that predicated the actions, because it's not that she didn't tell anyone. The crew in the bridge knew the plan clearly because they talk about it as they're going away. I think it gets to a point. To me, the only issue is it gets to a point where he gets to the point where he's going to mutiny. At that point, why don't you explain what's happening? Especially after he explains what Finn and Rose are doing to her. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't at that point she say, why would you do that? We have a plan. There's a planet right there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, fair enough. But a counterpoint to that is just, you say there's no reason why she should have told him, but there really is, because it's not like there's going to be a negative outcome to doing that. Worst comes to worst, he just doesn't listen. So still, why not just tell him? And also, it helps us as an audience.
Well, but I mean, he equally could have, like I mentioned, like the course of events might not have changed. If she told him, he also could have mutinied, right? If he did not believe that plan was going to be successful, he might have done the exact same thing. He's this cannonball, so she has no idea like what he's necessarily going to do with that information.
Well, okay, yeah. I mean, I guess whatever. I suppose it's fair, but
that's my take on it.
Yes,
but I totally understand the counterpoint.
But yes, at some point. But yes, at some point she should have told him at some point during this string of events, regardless, even if not right at the moment. It's that's the thing though. I do feel like this is it's kind of funny because there was a video from one particular person I saw who, I think what's his name? I think it's the Dishonored Wolf. Let me look it up. He's like a furry guy, I think. He made a very, 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 very viciously angry review. Yeah, okay, that's him. Review of this film, and he did this dumb shit. This is why I didn't want to call him out, but I already did, so it's too late. And I saw some other people mentioning this too, where they're like, they're calling this like this woman an SJW because she has purple hair, and like
I've seen that.
The point of this whole thing was that like it was like they're trying to force the idea that women are calm and collected and men are brash, and it's like, why can't it just be that Poe is brash and this particular woman is calm and collected? Like because she has pink hair, right? So if you have pink hair, the pink hair, that's what did it for. But so the reason I mentioned that is because people are flipping out about this Laura Dern's character. I have heard so much shit about Laura Dern's character in this film, as if like this is one of the film's biggest problems. Like this is why it's worse than the prequels, because it's got this fucking purple-haired lady in it who doesn't tell Poe something. Like, are you serious? Because to me, I like that. I agree, it's an issue, but my God, is it getting overblown? Like her character was fine. Like if it had just been Leia and Leia hadn't gotten knocked out, it would have been fine too. Like it to me, it's almost completely irrelevant. Like, yeah, I agree with the whole not telling him thing is dumb, but that's about the extent of that.
No, I like Laura Dern in this role. And
she was
the character is fine.
Yeah.
What I have heard from some people is, what if that character would have been Admiral Akbar? And that is something that I now wish was true, because man, that heroic sacrifice on Admiral Akbar's own ship, that heroic sacrifice would have carried so much more weight than it. I mean, not that it didn't. I mean, that scene was still incredible.
It was.
But if that was Admiral Akbar making that final decision, oh my God.
That was a missed opportunity. I saw people mentioning that too, because Admiral Akbar actually dies, and a lot of people didn't even realize he died because it was so unceremonious.
Right, because somebody says, "Oh, our whole bridge died." Admiral Akbar and some other people, and it's like, oh, okay.
You know what I will say about Admiral Akbar? I mean, like, I don't want them to celebrate his death because he's such a minor character. He's only big because he was like a meme and said like one line and looks cool, right? That
Right.
being said, though, if you make him the captain, it's fan service, but it's not too in your face about it. Like,
Exactly.
because if you don't know who Admiral Akbar is, then it would just be the same as watching this film now with Laura Dern in it, where you don't know who she is and she comes out of nowhere. It wouldn't have changed anything, but it would have been better because it would have made his death more ceremonious and in a way that wouldn't have felt too masturbatory. You know, it would have just
Although
been,
think about if they would have kept that exact same dialogue interaction between Laura Dern's character and Carrie Fisher, only instead of Laura Dern, it's a squid man.
Yes. Well, whatever the case, I actually agree. That was a missed opportunity. Another missed opportunity that I wish I could name the person who came up with it, but I don't remember who it was. Another missed opportunity is a Phasma redemption arc would have been really interesting. And it's something that I thought was going to happen when you see her eye, but instead he just fucking kills her. And it's like, it would have been interesting for multiple reasons. One, if Finn gave her a chance, it would actually make the rebels appear like the good guys again. Because, look, we know there's now a gray area, but that doesn't mean you want your good guys to just also be the bad guys, right? You still want them to be, look, even though there is this gray area, these rebels are clearly in the right? And sometimes they'll make bad decisions, but they're in the right. But
Although to be fair, he didn't necessarily kill her.
Well, yeah,
but he didn't help her either.
No, he didn't, that's the point. It's like, yeah, it's true, he didn't murder her, but the film presents her death as like an amazing, triumph. And that's the thing, that's the missed opportunity, is what if instead of that he like grabs her and holds her hand and brings her up and lifts her, and then she becomes a rebel? That would have been really interesting and really cool. And sure, I think Phasma was overhyped by the marketing. She's never been a big deal, but they clearly had her as somewhat of a big deal in this film. They made a big deal out of her being there. So I agree, that was a missed opportunity, and that would have been cool. Although I will point out, I was fine with the way it happened in the film. I'm not like against that. I just think knowing what could have been, I agree, that would have been pretty cool.
Hey, I just want to say, random aside, since we're talking about that scene and that ship, if Benicio del Toro was in that walker, I would have been so pissed.
What about that? Is this something people have been saying they wanted?
No. I just like the first time watching this movie, I saw that walker start moving, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is gonna be that Benicio del Toro movie." And he's gonna be like, "Hey, just kidding, I was good," and then it's freaking BB-8.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's right. That's funny. That thought didn't cross my mind, but man, if they did that, oh my god.
I would have been so mad.
So I've been talking about the negatives here, and that's the more interesting stuff that people want to hear, obviously. But let's real quick mention some of the really great stuff. So one thing I want to mention is that whole Red Room, seeing the Praetorian Guard fight, Snoke's death, all of that, absolutely stellar. Like, that entire scene was flooring.
Just so incredible. And I would even like take it a step back, starting from when her little pod lands into his ship, and then you have the elevator scene going into the Red Room. The buildup of that interaction, because of that, the simplicity of those shot counter shot scenes and all that character building that's happening between the two of them, the culmination of that between the elevator ride, her seeing his face when she lands, and then the two stormtroopers handcuffing her, and then the Red Room. Oh my god, just incredible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, like, when Kylo Ren kills Snoke, it's so satisfying. And
I know.
Not only that, but this is a moment where the constant head fakes actually worked in the film's favor, in my opinion, here. Because that was so satisfying, you genuinely believe they're about to team up. But when they don't team up, it's not like a disappointment. It's just like another plot turn. It's like, to find out that it really was starting to seem like Kylo Ren was ready to turn to the good side. But I think this is the moment where he decides to stop being conflicted and just, I am evil. Like, I'm on the dark side now,
Yeah, I think what's so great about that is, in that moment, while they're fighting, you have no idea where either of these characters are.
Right.
And then when he suggests that they team up, although I think deep down everyone probably knew Rey wasn't going to turn to the dark side.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a point where and Adam Driver plays this role incredible, by the way.
Oh yeah.
But there's a point where he like takes his hand out to her and says, "Join me," and then he says, "Please," in probably the most like downtrodden, like, I have nothing else. Mm-hmm. And there, like, at that moment, you really don't know where this is going to go.
Yeah.
And that's really great from a writing standpoint and from the acting, the actors in these scenes, the direction. It's just awesome.
Yeah, yeah, that was definitely my favorite scene. That's the scene that still sticks in my memory above all else. Also, Luke showing up, sort of as a phantom, I guess. That sequence where Kylo Ren fights Luke, although Luke isn't really there. That was also just brilliant. Like everything about that.
And I want to talk about this because this is probably the other biggest thing I've seen is that Rian Johnson destroyed Luke as a character, and my childhood is ruined.
Right.
I think that Luke in this film is incredible.
Yeah.
I think that I love jaded Luke. I love Luke as a hermit. I love the idea that Luke basically, and it happens a couple times in the film, it happens between Luke and Kylo, where there's like 3 different sides to the story, right? Mm-hmm. And then it also happens we were mentioning that elevator scene. It happens in that elevator scene where Rey and Kylo see the same vision but interpret it very differently.
Right.
I love the idea that Luke basically, in instinct, almost tries to kill Kylo Ren just like he tried to kill his father at one point. His resolve allowed him to not do that, and in this case as well, he feels such shame that he completely cuts himself off, not even from the world, but from the Force. Mm-hmm. And he in his mind, I'm assuming, has to believe that, and he talks about it, the Jedi should end, but I think to him, he needs to not be a part of any of this because he's just now making the world a worse place.
Right.
And I love that notion. I think where people got especially angry was that what I just talked about. They were like, oh, Luke would never turn a lightsaber on, like look into Kylo's mind, see the darkness and turn a lightsaber on or whatever. I think that's completely false. I think that is absolutely, like the original trilogy absolutely has predicates that could happen.
Yeah.
And the other thing that they mention is that, oh, we never get to see Luke be this like awesome Jedi master or whatever. And I think that is completely false because to me, that crate battle that they have or that his force projection has, I feel like is the true culmination of what a Jedi is. In that not only did he so he couldn't have actually swung a lightsaber at Kylo Ren. Right, the lightsaber didn't actually exist, but he didn't even try in that scene. All he did was like parry and dodge and try to talk Kylo Ren down and use his pacifism to help the rebels and the resistance and the light. And I think that is the actual true culmination of a Jedi Master, not someone who's doing like flips and like swinging around lightsabers and stuff. Because at the very end, Luke finds that the true way of the Jedi Order and the true way of the light side, even whether the Jedi end or not, is this pacifist route that he allows himself to take. And then you see, I think what's great about this final scene is then you see him. So you find out that he's not real. And then you see Luke just completely overexerted, floating above this rock. And that whole last couple of sequences on Ahch-To are incredible because I think that final shot where you have the twin suns again is a perfect end for Luke's entire heroic journey, right? Yeah. It ends where it all began. Him looking to the horizon with the 2 suns in front of him. Yoda even calls out, Luke, you're always looking to the horizon. And at the very end, that's what Luke is doing to when he then becomes one with the Force.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the whole thing was immensely satisfying. Like, it continued Luke's arc. He wasn't at the end of his arc still, which I thought was great. Like, tell me what do you really want? Like, do you really want another fucking Qui-Gon? No, not Qui-Gon Jinn. I guess Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi from the fucking prequels. Just a hooded guy who's boring as shit. Like what do you because even Yoda from Empire Strikes Back, like he had a lot of personality. And then he dropped it. Sure, he dropped it when he became the teacher, but that's because it was, the focus wasn't on him anymore. But we had scenes where Luke is, talking to Rey. We have dialogue with Luke, a lot of dialogue with Luke. And what do you want him to fucking do? Like, stand there and be like, okay, Rey, now you must do this. And it's like, I don't understand why anybody would want to see that. And, I also, at the same time, I also don't understand why people wouldn't want to see Luke continue to evolve, And it's not like he evolves into this evil character. We find out that he made a bad decision in between the last we saw him and now. That's pretty much it, and that bad decision has jaded him, which I feel like it would. If he were to do that, I feel like Luke's character would feel jaded. And I can also totally see why he wouldn't want to be held up as this legend and this icon, because you never get the impression in the original trilogy that like he's not like he's this egomaniac who isn't humbled at all, So pretty much everything.
Yeah, and I think
dealing with him,
and
I loved.
Yeah, and I saw some people saying that Luke took the non-heroic route by basically becoming a hermit, but I would disagree. I think in Luke's mind, he took the absolute complete heroic route in becoming a hermit, because Luke, the legend, couldn't be the legend that he was supposed to be in those moments with Kylo Ren. And so because of that, he feels like the true heroic path is for him to just not be a part of any of this universe anymore. And to the extent that he's not even within the Force. So even if his friends were in danger now, he can't even sense them anymore because he's cut himself off.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
all the island stuff I thought was great. I thought that this was all the stuff with Rey and Kylo, all the stuff with Rey and Luke, and the teachings that Luke gives her, and then obviously the big one when Yoda shows up. That's incredible. I think that Yoda in this film is great. I love Yoda's dialogue in this film, and I think Yoda has some really great things to say again in this one. I think that people will be quoting a couple of those Yoda lines, even coming out from this one now too. Failure being a teacher, failure being a central theme of this film, actually. And in that moment, Yoda is explicitly stating it, but I think that it's pretty apparent even before Yoda states it. But talking about failure and talking about how the true burden of a master is that your pupil will ultimately rise above you. In that moment, him talking about first Luke, because Luke was able to sense out the gray in Vader when Yoda and Obi-Wan were not necessarily able to do so. Even to the point where now you think about, just thinking about Yoda as a character, Yoda did not take the peaceful. Yoda was not a peaceful character, assuming going back to the prequels. When they finally find the Emperor, and Count Dooku, it's Yoda who fights them, who hilariously starts all this aggressive action. So in that way, now even Luke is stepping above Yoda in both the original trilogy, but even now in this film as well. Luke again takes that pacifist route. The other thing I love about this is obviously Luke has some sort of connection to Obi-Wan as a character, like thematically, right? This old veteran, this wizened old veteran who kind of does the heroic, noble sacrifice for the good of his friends. I think what's the interesting parallel there is, Obi-Wan says, "Strike me down, I become more powerful than you could ever imagine." In this one, Luke doesn't necessarily say that, but what he does say is, hey Kylo, hey Ben, if you strike me down in anger, I will be with you always like your father. I think that's amazing in general, because that riles Ben up so much. And then when Kylo does give in to anger and actually does try to strike Luke down, he then says, "See you around, kid," because now he will always be with Ben in that way. Yeah. That was just kind of a random aside, but just in general, I think that Luke's character is great in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything you pointed out. All the stuff you said that you liked about this film was pretty much the exact same stuff that was riveting me, that I think had you taken out the excess of this film, which there was there was quite a lot of, honestly. The film was just far too long for its own good. And And not that a Star Wars film can't be this long, but I just feel like if the story focused on everything that you were talking about there, this thing would be. I think this might be a masterpiece. Like I'm in love with so much of the Luke Rey stuff, the Rey Kylo Ren stuff, all of that, and even a lot of the Rebel scenes were very good too. So I mean, like, yeah, let's all in all, like, let's wrap up for this film so we can kind of talk briefly about the next one. And
yeah, so I'll say the last point that I'll just make for this one. There's a lot of great stuff. I mean, we haven't, besides the Revolution, we really haven't touched on a lot of the cinematography. Obviously, we talked about the hyperdrive stuff, but like all that stuff on Crate, whoever thought of that Crate planet is a genius. I think that looks incredible.
Oh yeah.
Those ski speeders. I think the one thing I want to call out, and I called it out briefly, is that Adam Driver in now The Force Awakens in this one has played this character to a T. I mean,
oh yeah.
Especially in this one, the nuance that Adam Driver brings to this role, I think is finally hitting on. I've heard it from other people. Is finally hitting on, I think, what Anakin probably should have been. Definitely. I think for me, I think that Kylo Ren has now easily become one of my favorite Star Wars villains, if not my favorite Star Wars villain, because you look at Darth Vader and he is so iconic and such a great cinematic villain, but really doesn't necessarily bring a lot to the table.
Yeah, he's not much of a character. He's
not much of a character. He's imposing. He's just an awesome villain to see.
Yeah.
But Kylo Ren or Ben Solo is so nuanced and emotional, and it's a different type of villain. Whereas Vader was this imposing juggernaut that just seemed unstoppable. Ben is just this confused kid who is over emotional and doesn't know his plot in life and is trying to deal with his parents being these superheroes and his master failed him, and the way that Adam Driver plays that role. I mean, I think the one scene that particularly sticks out in my mind is when he's in his ship and he has his finger on the trigger and he gets a vision, like he connects with his mom, and he like looks over to the trigger and he looks away and he takes his finger off, only to have the TIE fighters around him shoot the bridge. I think that, and what I also mentioned is like that, him reaching his hand out and just that simple please that he says. It's just, it's really great, and I can't wait for where they take this character in the next one. Also because I love General Hux, I love their interaction, and now that he is General Hux's boss, that is going to be hilarious to watch, I think, in the next one.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing, Kylo Ren, like, I think Kylo Ren was also the reason that I adored Force Awakens so much, because I just think this is a wonderful character, and like, I don't want another Darth Vader where it's just a guy who looks cool and is really scary. And don't get me wrong, Darth Vader.
Which is what I thought Kylo Ren was going to be in the build-up to Force Awakens.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, me too.
Had this character in a mask and a hood,
cross-guarded lightsaber.
Right, yeah. But he turns out to be so much more in that, and then now even in this one.
And I was just gonna say, like, I love Darth Vader from the original trilogy, and he's probably a more effective enemy. He's a more effective threat. I'd say for sure. Like from a cinematic angle, he's much more threatening to us as a viewer, and we're much more afraid of him than we are of Kylo Ren. So from that angle, Vader is much better. But from the character angle, Vader is just far worse, and that's fine because Vader wasn't intended to have that, you know. That deep character that you see, or be any kind of character study, until the very end. We learned there was an emotional undercurrent, and it was enough for us because, Vader was so simple that we didn't need to know too much about why this emotional undercurrent was there. It was there, and that's why it's so effective at the end of Return of the Jedi. But in this film, having that there the entire time is leaving a really good groundwork to do something with him in the next film. I don't know what, but they'll have to do something that will affect us as much as something like what Vader did in Return of the Jedi. But it's and they've laid an excellent groundwork for him to really become something in the next movie. But I'll go ahead and wrap it up since you said that was your last thing. So I'll say for this film, I would give this film an 8 out of 10, a flat 8, because I feel like if you take like I said, if you take a lot of that excess fluff out of this movie that I just didn't think was that great, take the casino scene out entirely, you construct a stronger, more tightly knit film, I think you'd have something incredible here. But that being said, there is an incredible film within this movie the whole way through. And even the stuff that I didn't love, I still generally liked and enjoyed. Even the casino scene was fine. I wasn't like pissed off watching it or anything. But like some of the there's so many stellar scenes in this movie in the main storyline here that just it just carries this film to a really high level. So it's slightly disappointing that it could be better, and I don't think it reaches its fullest potential. But that being said, I'm still very satisfied with the movie as a second installment, and I guess I would recommend it. Of course, you've seen it if you're watching this anyway, but
yeah, and I'd probably give it a 9. Like I mentioned at one point, I probably would have put this in, and I think it might still be in probably my favorite films list.
You would have hit this with when you first came out of this, you would have slapped this with a 10.
Oh, easy 10.
Yeah.
On that first one or two viewings. And then having seen it a couple of times, and probably again, just like Force Awakens, when I see it a couple years from now, right before the next one, I'll probably be a little. I think I'm gonna situate right around a 9 is where I'll end up. But I think to me, the other thing about this film, and maybe this can be our segue, I think that this definitely gets me excited for that new trilogy that Rian Johnson has given the reign, Disney has given the reins to, because if you aren't aware, Rian Johnson has been given the go-ahead to direct / produce his own trilogy.
Yeah.
We don't know what that means within the Star Wars universe. We don't know if that, I hope it's not a continuation of this main line, or if it's just something completely different. But it definitely gets me excited for that. Just in general, I very much enjoy, if you like this film and you want to check out more Rian Johnson stuff, I really enjoy Looper. Looper's really great. And he has some other stuff that's out there too. He kind of does sort of a lot of sci-fi thematic stuff, not necessarily sci-fi to the Star Wars extent, but
yeah, well, Star Wars is like a sci-fi fantasy sort of thing. It's more fantasy than sci-fi, really. So let's move on to something I wanted to talk about briefly, as well as something that I feel after watching this film is, as much as I enjoyed it, I don't know how good of a second installment in a trilogy this is, because I am very, very worried for the next film, in a ton of ways. And that's because this movie, it closed off so many avenues that for a third film, that all they have now is the story of Rey and Kylo Ren being evil. That's all you have. Okay, sure, I guess the Rebel stuff still continues, obviously. The First Order still around. But in terms of our main characters and everything we can do with them, it's the only thing I care to find out what's going to happen next on is Kylo Ren. This is not like at the end of Empire, where it builds it gives this ending that leaves so much space for a great third installment. Leaves so much space for a third installment that is going to cap off this trilogy in a really satisfying way. This film does not do that at all. And knowing the reception to this, and knowing that J.J. Abrams is not J.J. Abrams is going to write it, but whoever's going to write the next film is probably writing it now. Well, maybe not now, but is writing it after this film was written, I suppose, assuming that information is correct. And if they're going to try to retcon anything people didn't like about this movie, I wouldn't be surprised. If J.J. Abrams is going to play it safe again because of the reception of this film, there's so much that I'm really worried about that makes me think this next film, I mean, I hope it's good, but I don't think it's going to be totally honest. I don't think it's going to be great, at least.
Yeah, well, I think, usually that the third film in a trilogy has a certain
reputation.
Yeah. So we'll see. I think, because I completely agree with you. But on the other hand, because it is so, now he could kind of go anywhere as well. So he might be pigeonholed, or maybe he can completely take it somewhere else. I think that'll be up to him, I guess, at this point. The only thing that I'm glad is that the one thing that happened in The Last Jedi is you kind of wrap up, The Last Jedi has a lot of similar themes to Empire, has a lot of similar themes to Return of the Jedi. Because you get rid of Snoke, I think that gives you at least nothing else. This next film, I think that hands down, I don't see how it could become another Return of the Jedi style redemption sort of a thing. So, and in general with Kylo's character, I really, really don't think that it will be some sort of redemption arc. I just feel like it'd be so hard to do at this point. They could do it, but it'd be another one of those where I would feel like, man, that just feels so ham-fisted that you did that, because you built up so much through Force Awakens and The Last Jedi on like how just further and further down the hole Kylo is getting, to the point where like he had in this film more than Force Awakens, he absolutely had the opportunity to come back, and they didn't do it now. I don't see how you do it in the next one.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying with like them laying his foundation to do something interesting with his character. I specifically meant not do the same thing as Vader, because like I said, the reason it worked for Vader was because it showed us a side to Vader we'd never seen. In that moment, we learned there really was a genuine emotional undercurrent there, and that's why it was effective. But we already know that exists for Kylo Ren. We know it more. Like, that's the clearest thing about him, is that there's this emotional undercurrent. So if we're gonna end his trilogy the exact same way, it's gonna be so boring, because it's like it's so obvious. It's like oh, he's and that's another thing. That's what I was gonna kind of say, and you said it is him. Having ample opportunities to do it in this film, but not doing it. So like, what's gonna happen? So now he just does it. Like, it's right. Like, I know, but like, I don't want that. But at the same time, what else are you going to do with him? You're going to kill him off? You're going to make him die? Because then it feels kind of unwarranted in that angle too. Like, okay, we saw him become evil, but we actually care about him on some level. They've made us care about him. So what, Rey's going to kill him? It's not going to feel very triumphant if Rey kills him either,
Yeah,
so,
it's gonna be strange, because the other big question mark obviously is Princess Leia. So it was very clear. It was very clear that this ninth movie was going to be her final farewell in some capacity, and whether that was her final farewell triumphant or her final farewell in that she also had some sort of sacrifice. Now they're forced to do the sacrifice in some way. I don't really know how they're even going to handle that, honestly, at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah,
they really weren't. They really, that was completely out of their control, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it sucks. It's like such like dark irony that they pretty much have killed off all of the old cast except for Carrie Fisher.
I know, and I saw somebody tweet that they feel, I think it was a reporter or someone who had interviewed her before and had said that she would have loved to know. She would have loved and laughed at the irony that Luke dies before she does, even though Carrie Fisher has actually passed away.
Yeah, I know. But
I think that's interesting. So how about this? Theories for the next one. What do you think? Where do you think this goes?
Well, I've never been big on the whole speculating thing, but I guess
but then you can be angry about it when it doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, I don't know. That's my problem, though, is that I don't see possible angles for this to go well. That's my problem. Is I guess I could speculate, but I mean, I don't know that there's anything I'm really expecting. I feel like this, like I said, I feel like this next film is left with so few options, but at the same time, you do those options you're left with, and it's just going to be terrible. So I don't want to assume they're going to do them. Like, I don't want to assume they're going to kill Kylo Ren, because I don't feel like that would be satisfying. And I also don't assume they're going to redeem him, because I don't feel like that would be satisfying. And on the flip token, it's the same for everybody's character. Like, obviously Rey is going to triumph in some way at the end. And
so then maybe what they'll do is the Resistance and the First Order will meet up. Rey will be head of the Resistance, and Kylo will be head of the First Order. And they'll say, okay, how about you take this portion of the galaxy, and we'll take this portion, and then we'll be peaceful for the rest of eternity.
They're going to compromise. Yeah, I don't know. You know what I predict? General Hux is going to rise up and kill Kylo Ren, and General Hux is going to be the big bad guy at the end.
Oh my god, I would love that, though. No,
and then he's going to get redeemed.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
I don't know. I'm worried. I I love J.J. Abrams directing in The Force Awakens, but I do not think he's the person to try something super new and do something genuinely interesting. I don't think so.
Yeah, but I also don't know if I would have thought Colin Trevorrow was that person.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, from the moment I knew the guy who was going to direct the third Star Wars movie was the guy who directed Jurassic World, I was concerned. And I know Payson was too, the Cinemaster for everyone here. He was talking about that, I think, at the podcast I did with him, and how, like, because we saw Colin Trevorrow's movie, The Book of Henry, and it was just such a ridiculous movie that, like, we were concerned. But now kicking him off for J.J. Abrams, I'm like, I'm happier because I feel like he's a better director, and definitely we've proved himself to be a good Star Wars director. But is he gonna make the better film, the more interesting film? Like, I have no idea.
Yeah, so I think my theory is going into the next one. So I feel like for this to actually wrap up the Skywalker saga, which these mainline films were that's always what they were. I feel like for this to actually wrap up the Skywalker saga, you have to get rid of the Skywalkers. So I think obviously something's going to happen to Leia, and I think you have to kill Kylo Ren. Now, I think how they do that, I'm not entirely sure if it's just going to be one big battle at the end or something. I think that one thing I'm hoping to see in the next one, I think that they will somehow bring into the fold is this whole Knights of Ren thing. I think that Kylo is going to go find those Knights of Ren again, and those are going to be, and like him and his army are going to be like the big end villains of this trilogy. So I don't know if you're familiar with this Knights of Ren concept.
Well, they mentioned it in the movie, so yeah,
so they mentioned it. It was in one of the flashbacks in Force Awakens. I have to assume that these Knights of Ren are basically, we don't really know anything about them, but I have to assume that they were those other students that Kylo took with him when he left the Jedi Temple. We haven't seen them besides that one flashback, so I feel like if JJ is going to bring them out at any time, now's the time to bring them back.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I have to assume is that they have to end the First Order somehow as well.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think I know how they should do it. I think they should enter like a jungle planet with like a bunch of like cute teddy bears.
Yeah.
And
so
then
I
think the teddy bears should throw giant stones and sticks and destroy a giant empire that could easily crush them with like one vehicle. I think that should happen.
What I'm thinking is that they'll be building a second snow planet.
Right. Yes.
And so they're going to have to fight to destroy the second Snoke.
Absolutely.
planet.
You know what I really want to happen is actually that turns out that Snoke is not dead. He was a clay figure that he created in his devious plot so that they would cut the clay figure in half, you know, and he was using force projection to make the clay figure move. So in the third film, what you're going to have this scene where Rey is fighting Kylo Ren. She's viciously hitting him like, you know, fuck you, Kylo Ren. And Snoke sitting there like, yes, give in to your anger. And then Kylo Ren is going to, when Rey decides she can't do it, she won't do it because, you know, she likes Kylo Ren for whatever reason. He's, you know, and the Snoke will rise up and try to kill Rey, yes, exactly. But then Kylo Ren, he'll look back and forth and he'll see what Snoke is doing, and he's gonna pick Snoke up and he's gonna drop him down a shaft. I think that's gonna happen. Mark my words, that will happen.
Yeah, no, I definitely think Snoke's going to come back, and then to please the fan theory, Snoke's going to say, Rey, Kylo lied to you. I am your parents.
I am your parents, Darth Plagueis and Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's a concerning thing. But I feel like we've wrapped this up. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so.
So this definitely was not a mini-sode. I'll have to change the name of these. I'll just call it a bonus episode, I suppose.
A megasode.
Megasode. Yeah, I'll just call it a bonus episode. But I feel like you may see these from us for other occasions like this. I don't really know. But whenever you do, it'll be like a, you know, episode. This is episode 3.5. You'll see like, I don't know, 6.5 or whatever. And if we do 2 between episodes, we can do like a 0.5. And then, you know.
Yeah, maybe when the Beatles get back together.
Oh, yeah. I hear that's something that could happen this year.
They'll drop the next album.
Yeah, well, it'll be a mixtape because it'll be up for free on their Bandcamp.
Yeah, there's for free on SoundCloud.
Yeah. But
Black Album.
so we'll definitely talk about that when that happens. So Steven, I want to thank you for joining me to talk about Eminem's revival.
Finally, I knew that we would get there one day.
So I'm glad that we've kind of gone down that avenue. I know people were interested, and Steven, you want to give the outro if you remember it?
Yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, smash that like button.
10,000 likes. Let's get to 10,000 likes.
Sponsored by Loot Crate. Please buy our loot boxes and our crates.